Alright guys, how's it going? Welcome back. Nowadays you can't really drive a four-wheel drive around town without getting a lot of scornful looks from a bunch of do-gooders who would rather everybody went around on a bicycle or on the back of a horse. You can just about get away with it in rural areas like this, but you still occasionally find the odd nutter who's absolutely outraged that you've spent your hard-earned cash on a nice Range Rover or Q7. There's not a day that goes by at the moment where we don't see a bunch of protesters causing mayhem in a town centre or city centre, which basically just disrupts your average people going about their business like you or I. I often wonder if it wasn't for climate change, what would they all be protesting about? They'd find something, I'm certain of that. What they should do really is join forces, go and set up a little community in the countryside where they all live in yurts, don't bathe or shave or eat gluten or eat animals, rather than firing dirty looks at you or I for driving somewhere where we could perhaps cycle. Thankfully though, there's still one four-wheel drive car you can buy that just slips under the radar. A four-wheel drive car that will get you looks of sympathy rather than loathing. That brings me on to today's car, because today I'm in a 2002 Suzuki Jimny. People look at this car the same way that they look at a weak newborn puppy. And the Jimny certainly does feel like the run to the litter. It's about as threatening and masculine as McLovin. Straight away though, as soon as you jump in a Jimny, you can feel its character coming through. Most little Japanese cars have the charisma of a chest freezer, but not the Jimny. The model I'm in today is a 2002, and it has a 1.3 litre petrol engine, which produces about 82 horsepower. Now I thought the Jimny had been around since the late 90s. I mean, it has in the UK, it's been around since 98. But in the rest of the world, it's been around since 1970. And Suzuki have sold nearly 3 million of these in nearly 200 countries. This third generation Suzuki Jimny ran from 1998 to 2018. And that's an unbelievably long production run of 20 years. I mean, car manufacturers just don't do that nowadays. They replaced it in 2018 with the fantastically cool little new-shaped Jimny, which I love. I think it just looks great. And it's got some really great reviews too, although I've never driven one. This generation did have several facelifts over its 20-year run, but to be honest, only nerds will be able to tell the difference. Even I can't tell the difference, which is saying something. Around town it feels quite nippy and there's quite a bit of torque, even though it's a little 1.3 litre engine. But on a run, I mean, I'm currently sat doing 55 miles per hour on the bypass on the dual carriageway, and it feels a little laboured. I wouldn't really want to go much quicker than that. I don't think I'd want to do a long journey in it. Although you might think this is just a wet lettuce of a Jeep with no four-wheel drive pedigree, you'd be wrong, because it's a proper off-roader with low range. It's not just a real-life Barbie and Ken Jeep, as its looks would suggest. It's much better than that. This one uses a 1.3 litre petrol engine which produces just 82 horsepower, which gives it a quite pedestrian 0 to 60 time of 16.5 seconds. In certain markets they sold it with a 1.5 litre Renault Nissan turbo diesel engine, which I imagine would be quite good because it would give it a bit more torque. But that turbo diesel model never made it past the White Cliffs of Dover. We only got the petrol models, which are surprisingly good actually. It's all you'd need for this kind of car. If I was an estate agent, I would describe this interior as utilitarian, but I'm not. So what I will say is it's about as well equipped as a bicycle. You do get some options though. You've got electric windows, what else? A clock, which funnily enough looks like the same clock in my GT86. You get a radio CD player. What else do you get? That's about it. The plastics do feel a little bit cheap, to be honest. I never thought that you could get so much movement from a glove box. Everything feels a little bit cheap. You get 2 horn buttons on the steering wheel, which does sound like something Fisher-Price have made. So I bought this one a few weeks ago and took it straight down to the body shop to have a few alterations done. And I must admit, I bought this the day after the new Defender was released. And having been online and spec'd up my new Defender with its white steel wheels, I got a little bit carried away with this one, hence why it's got white steel wheels. I do think it looks quite cool though, although I'm not completely sold on the idea of the Jimny transfers yet, so they might come off. So what's it like to drive? Well, have you ever driven an old Jeep Wrangler? Or better yet actually, have you ever driven a CJ7 Renegade? It's kind of like that. It's very, very rough and ready. This is a car that would make an old Defender feel quite luxurious. The ride, as you can probably tell from the shaking camera, is a little bit choppy. In fact, when I say choppy, I mean rough. Imagine being in the crow's nest on the Titanic when it hit the iceberg. That's what it's like when you run over a cat's eye in a Suzuki Jimny. There is a surprising amount of torque though from the little petrol engine. And what you won't be prepared for is the cheesy grin it puts on your face immediately. It's a very fun little car to drive. On a long journey though, it might give you a bit of backache. It feels very dated and very antiquated, but having said that, it's nearly 18 years old, and the design's 21 years old, so you've got to cut it some slack, I suppose. There's quite a lot of engine noise, as you're probably picking up from the microphone. The ride's firm. You go down a bump or over a cat's eye, and you know about it. The steering is light and vague. It bounces all over the road like a space hopper. But all those things quickly become irrelevant because you'll be grinning ear to ear, and I don't really know why. It's also quite good on fuel because it's so light and the engine's so small. You'll average 35-36 miles per gallon. In normal circumstances, it's rear-wheel drive, but when you switch it to four-wheel drive, it adds power to the front too. You can switch it from two-wheel drive to four-wheel drive at speeds of up to 60 miles an hour too, which is quite impressive. Some four-wheel drives you have to be stationary to do that, but not with the Jimny. Visibility is good due to its large windows, and the fact it's so small, I know exactly where the tailgate finishes. You can buy it as a 5-speed manual or a 4-speed automatic, but the autos are quite rare on the used market, and they always fetch a silly premium. They also sold a convertible Jimny if you want that Malibu Barbie look. But beware, if you buy the convertible, the road noise will increase, wind noise will increase. Now, I rented one of those last year on holiday with my family, and the weather was rubbish on this particular day, and it leaked like a sieve. So if you are in the market for a convertible one, just check that it doesn't leak, because I suspect most of them will. So it's not very practical. There's not much interior space. I've got nowhere here for my right knee because it's right up against the door card. The boot is about as big as the vegetable drawer on my fridge. You won't want to take it on a long journey because you'll get a bad back, sore knees, and probably you'll be deaf by the time you get there. But for around town, it is quite good fun. Off-road, it's also very good because it's so light and the wheelbase is so narrow. It seems to just get over anything, which makes it a very capable four-wheel drive. The main issue here in the UK with the Jimny is rust. Most old ones are as rotten as a pear. I've had this one under seal to try and protect it, but there will still be some signs of surface rust just because of its age. They just don't seem to cope very well with the British weather. So if you are after an older one, beware. As far as reliability goes, they're a safe bet. They rarely go wrong, and when they do, they're quite inexpensive to repair. They're cheap to maintain too. They're also very cheap to buy. You can pick them up for around £1,000. One like this with low mileage and full service history will cost you around £3,000. If you want a good automatic, you can easily add a couple of grand onto that price because they just fetch a stupid premium. If for some strange reason I was told I had to use one of these every day for the next 5 years, don't get me wrong, I'd be a little bit gutted. But if I was in the market for a small four-wheel drive car, then I'd definitely consider one. I'd certainly rather have one than a Fiat Panda four-wheel drive. I know they're not for everyone, but they are very good at what they do. There's not much else out there like it really. There's the Daihatsu Terios, but they don't do that in a short wheelbase version. There's the Vitara, I suppose, or the Grand Vitara as it's called, but that's really no better than the Jimny, and it's more expensive. As you go into corners in this thing, you do have to back off a little bit because you get the impression that it would roll over if you pushed it a little bit too hard. I wouldn't like to try and do the moose test in this because there is quite a lot of body roll. So thank you once again for watching. Give the video a thumbs up if you liked it. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't done already. If you've got any questions or comments, leave them below and I'll do my best to get back to you. Cheers guys, I'll see you next time.